Me. She called 911 on my brisket like I was launching fireworks off the deck. 5 minutes. That's all it took to turn my peaceful brisket cookout into a full-blown HOA meltdown. I was just minding my smoker at the lake cabin when the self-declared queen of the neighborhood called 911 like I'd set the forest on fire. She thought sirens would shut me down. What she didn't know was, me. Karma runs faster than barbecue smoke. What happened next? Let's just say after this, you'll never trust an HOA clipboard again. Where are you watching from? Comment your location below. My name's Mason Knox, remote data analyst by day, brisket disciple by weekend, and inheritor of Grandpa Lou's prized lake cabin and his sacred Saturday smoking tradition. He didn't leave me a gold watch or a 401k. He left me a pellet smoker and 200 feet of waterfront with a side of generational barbecue pride. I don't own a yacht or a Tesla. I own hickory pellets and peace, until Charlene Mayweather showed up armed with a clipboard and the ego of a substitute principal on power meds. She came strutting across the gravel like she was marching into a zoning hearing, waving her iPhone like it was a warrant. "Or, sir, this fire is unregulated and illegal," she declared. I didn't even flinch. Just smiled and said, "It's a brisket, Charlene. Not a napalm simulator." That didn't stop her from claiming my smoke was invading her garden's airspace. Mind you, the breeze was drifting toward the lake. Her tulips were safer than a submarine. 3 minutes later, she pulled out her phone and whispered with the tone of someone reporting a terrorist. "Yes, I'd like to report a chemical burn. Thick black smoke. Short man with tongs appears hostile." Now, I may not be tall, but I was holding barbecue tongs, not launching RPGs. I kept my cool, sipped my sweet tea, and prepped a plate. By the time the fire truck arrived, half the neighborhood had lawn chairs and popcorn. Deputy looked at my setup, state-of-the-art smoker, fire-rated patio, full permits on deck. Then looked at her and said, "Mom, this is the most compliant barbecue I've seen all year." She turned redder than my spice rub. That's when I realized she didn't care about fire codes. She cared that someone in her HOA-free blind spot was having fun without her permission. But the best part, this was only the appetizer. Just because someone speaks with confidence doesn't mean they speak with authority. She tried to throw water on my grill. But I was just getting ready to serve her legal trouble, medium rare. Monday started with a bright sunrise and a violation taped to my smoker, unauthorized meat rotation. Apparently, brisket should not be flipped without prior written consent. Tuesday's charge: excessive flavor transmission. Translation: my dry rub offended someone's lavender bush. By Wednesday, the notice read, illegal joy, which is rich coming from Charlene, whose idea of fun is alphabetizing bylaws and fining toddlers for sidewalk chalk. Every day became a new round of show psych ops. Wind chimes. Sound pollution. My wife's folding lawn chair. One regulated outdoor furniture. The clincher came when I installed a motion sensor duck decoy. Charlene claimed it was a threat to neighborhood avian aesthetics. Kendra, who once managed logistics for an overseas combat base, squinted at the notice and said, "I've invaded entire countries with fewer rules." Charlene wasn't enforcing the rules. She was writing new ones by candlelight like she was drafting the HOA Constitution from a bunker. One bylaw update even banned open-air seasoning, whatever that means. Another outlawed improper utensil handling, which I guess included the time I used salad tongs to move firewood. On Thursday, I was hit with a $200 fine for culinary aggression. The description read deliberate preparation of meat with intent to cause olfactory disturbance. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some neighborly disagreement over smoke drift or grass height. This was war. Not with tanks or drones, but with paper cuts and passive-aggressive formatting. Charlene had decided my cabin was a threat to her imaginary empire, and every fine, every retroactive bylaw, every tone-policed email, was a salvo fired from her ceramic flower printed keyboard. Power trips don't need a real destination, just gas, a steering wheel, and someone like Charlene who thinks enforcing joylessness is community service. She came for my smoker with clipboards blazing. But she forgot. I'm trained in spreadsheets and subpoenas. Charlene once fined a man for a gnome incitement. That gnome, wearing a tiny sombrero, it started with a wind chime that dared to sound too festive. Roger, a retired Air Force weatherman whose idea of danger used to involve hurricanes, got a 75 violation for auditory turbulence. His wife Celeste, hit with a 50 fine for aggressive positivity, after waving at a jogger too enthusiastically. I couldn't tell if we were living in a neighborhood or auditioning for a dystopian HOA-themed sitcom. Roger invited me over like we were planning a classified mission. Bring coffee. And a pen. He slid a manila folder across the patio table like it was packed with launch codes. Inside he 14 OA notices, each dumber than the last. Birdbath water clarity infraction, mailbox color deviation, overgrown enthusiasm. That one still makes Celeste wheeze laugh, me. But it was what came after the fines that raised eyebrows higher than Celeste's sprinkler heads. Every notice was followed, almost immediately, by a letter from Pine Bluff Realty. The letters had that fake friendly tone you'd expect from a chatbot trying to sell you reverse mortgages. Dear homeowner, we understand your current challenges and would love to ease your burden with a generous offer. Generous, in this case, meant 40% under Zillow. Pine Bluff even included an RSVP envelope. Me, as if we were being invited to a party to celebrate our own eviction. Then it happened to me. Monday morning I opened my mailbox and found 2 pieces of mail. One was a fine for grill placement inconsistent with visual harmony, and the other was, you guessed it, a buyout offer from Pine Bluff. I flipped it over. The acquisitions rep. Shayla K. A quick online search turned up her full name, Shayla Kendrick, same last name as Charlene, and there it was. Cousin. Probably shared bath towels as kids and now sharing a business model that smells like burnt ethics and wet legal pads. I called Roger and said, we're not living in a neighborhood, we're living in a foreclosure farm. That's when we started digging, not in our yards. Charlene would have fined us for soil agitation, but in public records. Celeste, retired accountant, lover of spreadsheet, and secret database whisperer, started cross-referencing HOA violations with property transfer data. The results were spicy. 32 homes had received excessive fines over the last 2 years. 19 of them had sold within 3 months of the first violation. 17 were bought by Pine Bluff Realty or a shell company registered to Charles Ken Properties, LLC, Charlene Kendrick. You couldn't make it up if you tried. Turns out HOA violations weren't about rules. They were pressure cookers. Crank up the heat until folks couldn't take it anymore. Then sweep in with a lowball offer and a closing date. The HOA wasn't protecting the neighborhood. It was asset stripping it with a smile. Charlene's HOA handbook. Just a velvet-wrapped eviction tool. Roger called it hostile neighborhood takeover disguised as lawn care. Celeste dubbed it real estate racketeering with a hydrangea budget. I had a better name, HOA for hire, harassment on arrival. The next night we met on Roger's deck and started charting it all out on butcher paper. Dots, arrows, dates, everything. It looked like a conspiracy board from a crime drama, only our villain wasn't a mob boss. It was a woman who wore pearls while issuing fines for festive doormats. Charlene's cousin might have worked in real estate, but her real job was house hunting by harassment. She didn't need listings. She manufactured them with paperwork, and once we saw the pattern we couldn't unsee it. It wasn't justice anymore. The Bernsteins down the road had been fined for ornamental imbalance. The Martins were told their bird feeder was suspiciously unregulated. All followed by Pine Bluff offers. The kicker. Charlene had updated HOA bylaws, retroactively, to make these fines legal. She was rewriting rules to fit her profit margins. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just personal. It was orchestrated, calculated. Corporate-backed HOA warfare. If it walks like extortion and smells like charcuterie, it's probably an HOA in disguise. She thought she could scare us into moving, but we were about to audit her whole kingdom, with spreadsheets, subpoenas, and a side of brisket. Stick around, the HOA roast is just getting started. If paranoia had a form, it'd be Charlene hiding behind a hydrangea with binoculars and breath mints. Roger told me, every good war room needs intel. And sometimes, it's in your attic behind a box of expired holiday tinsel and one very judgmental plastic Santa. I laughed. Then climbed the rickety pole, down ladder with the grace of a man not totally convinced the floor joists would forgive him. And just like Roger said, tucked behind Grandpa Lou's Civil War chess set and a dented crock pot. I found it. A dusty metal box labeled, in case HOA gets cute. Inside was paperwork thicker than Charlene's hairspray and more legally binding than her soul-snatching bylaws. The original deed, signed in 1983, had a founding clause stamped right on it, complete with a county seal, notarized signature, and Grandpa Lou's handwriting. This property shall forever remain exempt from all future homeowners associations, bylaws, boards, and busybodies. There was even a paragraph about exclusive lake rights and independent zoning. Like Grandpa had designed a barbecue bunker with legal force fields. But the best part, a yellowing sticky note stuck right to the clause. If they ever try you, son, serve them this with a side of ribs and a smile. Love, Lou. I laughed so hard I nearly fell through the attic floor. Grandpa wasn't just a pit master. He was a paperwork ninja with brisket sauce in his veins. Turns out, when Lou helped form the lakeside area back in the day, he negotiated a carve-out. Gave up a slice of land for community access in exchange for total autonomy. The other founders signed off, assuming nobody'd care once they built their mansions and hired their first landscaper therapist, But Lou kept the receipts, literally. I read every page like it was the gospel of brisket. property rights, independent zone and OA immunity. I even found a clause labeled override rights. Absolute. It might as well have read, Dear Charlene, go touch grass. I called Kendra my Navy wife and part-time destroyer of nonsense and read the whole thing aloud. She whistled. Babe, you're holding legal napalm, and it smells like smoked justice. I wanted to frame it and march it to the HOA with a foghorn, but Roger, ever the tactician, told me to hold off. Let her tighten the noose with another clipboard. Then we flipped the script. The next day, Charlene didn't disappoint. Another fine. Me. This one for grill accessories exceeding moral uniformity standards. She added a handwritten note at the bottom. Consider this your final warning. I stared at the paper, sipped my coffee, and smiled like a man who just found the nuclear launch codes. By Thursday, I drafted a legal response. Simple, sharp, and seasoned like a dry rub. I included copies of the founding clause zoning diagrams and every notarized signature Grandpa Lou ever collected. Even highlighted the section about lake rights and HOA immunity in bright mustard yellow. But I didn't send it. Not yet, because we weren't done collecting receipts. Charlene thought she was writing permanent law with a mechanical pencil. I had an eraser the size of Texas and a filing cabinet that said otherwise. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you defend with documentation and petty precision. She wrote the bylaws in pencil. I was about to sign her resignation in permanent ink and maybe laminate it for fun. Stick around. This HOA takedown's just starting to sizzle. Charlene sued me for thermal intimidation via Mesquite. That's not law. That's lunch. It started with a packet, thick, smug, and postmarked with the HOA's favorite font, aggressive serif. Charlene had officially filed a lawsuit against me for, get this, culinary terrorism, intentional emotional smoke provocation, and my personal favorite, unlicensed community disruption. I didn't know whether to call a lawyer or a sandwich artist. Even the court clerk snorted when I handed it over. She asked if it was satire. I said no. Just Saturday at Lakeside HOA, Kendra took one look at the paperwork and said, oh, they want war paperwork. Great, let me introduce them to military spreadsheets. By Sunday morning, our dining room looked like a classified intel operation. She mapped out every HOA expense over the last 5 years. And guess what turned up in those tranquility assessments? A consulting firm run by, you guessed it, Charlene herself, Community Vibe Consulting LLC DAO. I swear to you, she invoiced the HOA for $9,200 worth of mood calibration. I pay $150 a month for trash pickup and emotional blackmail. The receipts got wild. One entry read, herbal diffusion for aggression mitigation. Followers $400. It was sage, literal sage. Another, neighborhood empathy training $3,800. Turns out, it was a YouTube playlist of dolphin sounds. When I brought this up at the emergency meeting, Charlene stood up with the confidence of a substitute teacher on her third power trip of the day and said, that is none of your concern, Mr. Riley. I smiled. Oh, but it is. Because you billed me for spiritual wind alignment, and I haven't felt a breeze since April. By the time we pieced everything together, the scam was clearer than a HOA pool on chlorine overdrive. This wasn't about rules. It was a multi-year hustle in cakeys and clogs. Charlene had weaponized governance, wrote herself a check, and called it civic duty. And now she was using the legal system like a high-in-salad spinner, throwing paperwork around and hoping nobody noticed the croutons were counterfeit. In every petty tyrant, there's usually a hidden invoice. She tried to bury me in paperwork, but I was about to turn the HOA into Exhibit A. Kendra rolled in with a laptop, a printer, me and the fury of 100 unpaid PTO days. It started with folding chairs, lukewarm lemonade, and a community center projector older than Charlene's grudge. By the time the HOA meeting began, half the neighborhood had shown up, some curious, some carrying emotional popcorn. Kendra rolled in like she was leading a corporate cup, laptop open, spreadsheets glowing, clicker in hand. Her opening slide, a timeline titled, When Things Went Stupid, a financial memoir. I followed with, tonight's presentation is called How to Roast a Dictator in 4 Charts or Less. The first pie graph was labeled, Charlene's consulting costs vs actual vibes improved. It looked like a zero doing yoga. Slide after slide, we laid it bare: misappropriated funds, duplicated payments, retroactive bylaw edits, and one suspicious charge labeled, emergency crystal infusion. The crowd was shifting in their chairs like a congregation being shown what hell looks like in Excel format. Then Kendra pulled up the HOA's property maps and overlaid them with the real zoning records from the county. Turns out, half the neighborhood didn't even legally fall under HOA jurisdiction. Cue audible gasps and 3 dropped clipboards. Just when we thought we'd hit the peak, Roger, sweet, retired Roger, stood up and read aloud a leaked email Charlene accidentally forwarded to him that said, "We'll make them so miserable they'll sell." Charlene, now redder than her favorite lip liner, slammed her folder shut. "This is a coordinated smear campaign," she barked me. But her voice cracked like a vinyl record left in the sun. Someone in the back whispered, "Well, at least it's organized." Celeste piped up, "You billed us for goat yoga, Charlene." In a draught, a murmur of laughter turned into a wave of fury. Kendra brought up a flowchart labeled, "Nepotism flow follow the cousins," connecting Charlene's sister to the real estate firm to the OA's aggressive violations. One neighbor shouted, "I got fined for waving at my mailman." Another yelled, "You shut down my daughter's lemonade stand." It wasn't just rebellion, it was vindication marinated in sarcasm. When the final slide appeared, total HOA funds collected vs HOA projects completed, the room turned from annoyed to nuclear. There were boos, there were claps. There was someone humming, Battle Hymn of the Republic. A vote was called right then and there. Kendra stood like a general overseeing democracy's finest hour. Ballots were passed, pens clicked. Man, when the votes were counted, it wasn't even close. Every single hand save one voted to remove Charlene. She tried to object, but Roger gently raised his HOA handbook and said, according to page 13, subsection C by, operations were immediately suspended, bank accounts frozen, meetings canceled. Me and Charlene, who once fined a family for holiday lights with insufficient symmetry, was now exiled from the very newsletter she used to write. I leaned toward Kendra and whispered, "Me, think she'll miss charging us for air quality assessments." She smirked. Me, only if she can invoice herself. But the real satisfaction came not from her downfall, but from the neighborhood rising up like bread after bad yeast. No one cheered. We didn't need to, we had proof. We had peace, and we had 3 neighbors already offering to restart the HOA, with term limits and potlucks. Democracy's best friend isn't freedom, it's documentation. She thought she was untouchable, me. But she just got voted off her own gated island. Charlene tried to run for city council. She lost to a cat named Mayor Whiskers. When you find an expired notary stamp from a dead county official on your HOA charter, me, you don't call it a hiccup, you call it a confession in ink. That's exactly what I found Tuesday morning while thumbing through the fake commandments Charlene called governance. Me. The 2005 charter she kept waving around like Moses on a HOA-funded hill, never filed, never notarized, and sporting a seal from a guy who'd been fired a year before it was proved. I called the county. They checked their records. Then they asked me to repeat the name twice. That's how I knew things were about to get crispy. By noon, word spread faster than hot grease on a cast iron skillet. Roger, Celeste, Kendra, and even Doris, the 89-year-old who once told me I overwatered my begonias, were gathered in my driveway. I showed them the county emails, the unfiled charter, the laughably bad attempt at a forged seal. Doris clutched her pearls so hard, I thought she might snap her own necklace. "That woman's been stealing from us since Bush had black hair," she muttered. Charlene didn't just break the rules. She wrote them in invisible ink and charged everyone for the decoder ring. The sheriff's office showed up before dinner, and Charlene came out like she'd rehearsed the role of confused victim. In a daytime legal drama, "I demand you step off my property immediately," she shouted, me waving a printed copy of her fake charter like it was the Constitution. Deputy Randall glanced at the paper, raised an eyebrow, then asked, "Did you get this off Etsy?" That's when her expression cracked. Me. Her printer ink still smelled fresh. Realizing her HOA fantasy world had finally popped, she tried to run inside, but tripped on her own decorative flamingo. The irony had better timing than a sitcom laugh track. Inside, they found 30 years of HOA records, stacked next to unopened wine boxes labeled emergency board business. Financial documents traced payments straight into her personal consulting company, Neighborhood Synergy Solutions. Turns out Synergy was code for siphoning, and her board, just a bunch of retired friends who thought Robert's Rules was a steakhouse. As the deputy read her rights, she blurted, "I was just trying to maintain standards." To which Mrs. Chen replied, "Honey, you can't even maintain a calendar." That's the moment everyone knew Charlene wasn't just going down. She was going viral. The town hall was packed the next day. Residents demanded restitution, apologies, and maybe a ceremonial burning of the bylaws. I stood up, held up Grandpa Lou's founding clause, and explained why this cabin was never under their thumb to begin with. The lawyer Charlene hired resigned mid-meeting. Roger brought cupcakes labeled fraudulent flavor. Charlene, she tried to live stream her innocence on Facebook Live, but accidentally used a filter that gave her cartoon raccoon eyes. "They'll regret this," she muttered as she was escorted out. Someone in the back whispered, "Only thing I regret is not filming sooner. Some empires fall with fire, others fall with PowerPoint." She ruled with citations, but but I ruled with county records and a brisket side platter. And what happened to the HOA's missing $90,000? Me. Let's just say my smoker wasn't the only thing getting grilled in the next chapter. I didn't sue her. I bought her house. With cashback rewards and a veteran discount. Turns out karma runs faster than a burnt meat thermometer. Charlene's grand finale came during a community fudge sale where she tried to launch a mayoral campaign while hawking half-melted brownies. Right as she stood on a picnic bench yelling, "Me? This is political harassment!" 2 deputies walked up mid-brownie, slice and handed her a court summons. She tripped over her own clipboard trying to protest. I think the brownies testified against her. Me. One even landed frosting first on her OA sash. By the following Thursday, her house was posted for a foreclosure auction. And who strolls in but Kendra's cousin Travis, a part-time locksmith, full-time DJ, me, and proud owner of a rubber chicken collection. He snagged the house for 40% under market, installed a hot tub in the driveway, and raised a chicken coop he named zoning violation. First thing he did, me, painted a sign that said "Oche, free and finger lickin'." The chickens wore aviator goggles. Charlene would have called the National Guard. With the HOA dissolved, me, the neighborhood finally got its personality back. No more drive-by clipboard threats, me. No more doormat color violations. No more citations for excessive humming. It was like we collectively shook off 18 years of bureaucratic gaslighting. I installed a bronze mailbox plaque that read, me. Violations will be smoked and served with slaw. Even Doris, the woman who once reported me for a smug lawn chair posture, dropped off deviled eggs and asked if I could teach her about dry rubs. Healing. It turns out, tastes like brisket. But here's the part that made my accountant giggle like a toddler in a bouncy castle. Me. Turns out the fake HO still had an operating ledger. And in that ledger were 18 years of backdated dues. They claimed I owed over $12,700 in fines. They tried to sneak past me. Except their accounting software had the same security as a hamster in a shoebox. We pulled the records, filed suit, and the court ordered full reimbursement, with interest. The check arrived wrapped in leftover OA letterhead. I framed it next to my smoker with a little sign, "Here lies bureaucracy. 1987 now. May it rest in pieces." Justice isn't always a gavel. Sometimes, me, it's a grill with Wi-Fi and notarized receipts. So in the end, all I really wanted was to honor my grandfather with a little brisket by the lake. But what I got instead was a masterclass in modern nonsense. HOA theater and the bureaucratic Olympics. And yet somehow I'm glad it happened. Because every time someone like Charlene tries to turn community into control, there's someone else, armed with common sense, legal files and a meat thermometer, ready to stand their ground. This wasn't just about barbecue, it was about legacy. Me. About how the people who build something honest should never be bullied by the folks who print rules after the fact and call it order. It's about how silence can look like compliance. Me. Until one person decides to answer a clipboard with a constitution. The lesson. Truth doesn't always show up with a gavel. Sometimes it arrives wearing tongues, holding receipts, me, and smelling like hickory smoke. If you got a laugh, felt a little justice, or just wish your HOA came with a flavor warning, drop a comment below and tell me your story. Hit that like button, subscribe, me, and stay with us, because the next tale might just be about your neighborhood's biggest villain. And remember, you can't fake authority forever. Not when the smoker's hot, the law is real, me, and the whole neighborhood is watching.